Hey, Karen.
So good to see you.
Good to see you too.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining the Department of Tourism, Hospitality, and Event Management's Tourism Tuesday. This weekly speaker series will highlight nationwide industry professionals, showcasing their background and expertise in hospitality, tourism, and leisure. This week, we welcome Joni Newkirk, founder and CEO of Insight. Joni spent 20 years with Walt Disney Parks and Resorts, rising to Senior Vice President of Business Insight and Improvement, where she was responsible for managing over $8 billion in revenue for the worldwide theme parks and resorts. I'll now turn over the session to Joni. Thank you so much, Joni.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. So I'm happy to be here. It's an important day, and I'm sure you'll all remember it by this presentation versus any type of election happening. But probably not. You'll forget it after this. So I thought what I could do today, if I thought about something that might be worth sharing based on my experience, I decided to probably talk about leading change specifically through more transformational type projects or major strategies that were pretty all encompassing and affected, large parts of an organization. And what I want to do is actually use like 3 examples to take you through that. But my fish on this page really are symbolic of swimming upstream, which if there's one common theme, I think, that goes through all of them, is that it's not easy, right? So leading large transformational change projects oftentimes and almost always have some technology component to them. Isn't easy, and it's more difficult, particularly in a large organization versus if you're doing it in a startup company. Some pretty big differences there. But what I'll take you through today is just a few highlights of my career. So I went to UF, and now I have a company called Integrated Insight, but I'll take you through my career path briefly. And then use these 3 examples to talk about what were successful but difficult strategies to implement. And through each of them, within each of them, talk about what was it about leading change? What were the lessons that we learned there that really gives you an insight into what it takes to make it happen? And then leaving lots of times for Q&A. So you can ask me questions about any of these projects or anything else that you care to ask me about. So yeah, I'm starting with just a little bit about my background. I did go to the University of Florida. I graduated with a BA in statistics. It was not my first major. I think I was in education first, but quickly realized I was not going to make a great teacher. But I was exposed to statistics in high school, where my advanced math teacher actually did an experiment with a half a semester of statistics and a half a semester of matrix algebra. And I really loved it. So thinking back to that, I thought I'm going to go ahead and try major with this. And I didn't quite know what I would do with it. But then I did about 10 years later actually go and get a degree in industrial engineering from University of Central Florida. So my first professional job after the University of Florida was at St. Joseph Hospital. And there I was doing operational efficiency analysis. So just understanding how to operate a hospital more efficiently to get more throughput, less labor cost, as it was pretty labor intensive. But I only stayed there about 6 months, primarily because of Denver. I didn't particularly care to stay in Denver and moved back to Florida. So I started with Orlando Health doing strategic planning, working on projects like the pediatric hospital that they built, getting approval for pediatric cardiac programs, for neonatal programs, all of which had to be approved by the state. And I did that for about 5 years before I went to Lockheed Martin, which is a defense contractor, but I was working on the network planning side. So what we did was based on excess capacity that was in a lot of the network communication systems for government clients, we were able to sell off some of that to commercial clients. So we would figure out the capacity that we had and price it out and sell it, put it up for sale for commercial clients. So I did that for about 5 years before I went to Disney. And I actually answered an ad in the paper, at that time for an operations research manager. And I just finished my IE degree from UCF. And so I applied. And I started by doing forecasting, and I actually stayed involved with the forecasting function throughout my career there, but forecasting attendance primarily. And then based on that, they promoted me to director of research because we were at a point in time where there was some pretty rapid growth happening at Disney in terms of the number of hotels we were building, cruise lines, sports, getting into the sports business, vacation club business. And we really required a lot more research than what we were able to do previously. So I built a full service research group within the company. Then in the late 90s, got promoted to the VP of Forecasting and Research. And then I finished my career there the last several years as the Senior Vice President of a group called Business Insight and Improvement. So not only the forecasting and research, but also pricing, revenue management, and then the industrial engineering group. It's through that role, the SVP role, that I was able to actually really get engaged in these transformational type projects, both developing the concepts for them and implementing them, as well as overseeing the revenue side of it. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. But it was a great career, 20 years there. I thought I would retire from Disney, but basically got a bug to start my own company. I wanted to see if I could do it. And I also wanted to get back to doing more of the work versus overseeing the work. And so my partner and I, who was also at Disney, started Integrated Insight about 12 years ago. And we do a lot of what we did at Disney. So a lot around new business development, business optimization, and then a very strong component of research and consumer insights. We've been named to the Inc. 5000 fastest growing private companies 4 times. And our company's been doing really, really well until this year. But we were talking earlier that, yeah, I think we're going to make it, but it's just been a really tough year, particularly considering most of our clients are in travel and leisure. So that's a little of my background. So there's 3 strategies that I want to use as examples and different lessons learned in each one. And I also had a different role in each one. So the first one was the Magic Your Way revenue strategy at Walt Disney World. And this is one that I led the effort from concept through implementation. So we'll talk about that one first. After that came the My Magic Plus project at Walt Disney World, very much based on technology, very much intricate amount of technology working together to enhance the guest experience. In this role, I was responsible, I had senior revenue responsibility for the company. So I was responsible for analyzing and verifying the veracity of the revenue streams. So in essence, saying to our shareholders that if we're asking for this much money to invest in this project, that this will be the return on investment, and we can stand behind that. And then the last one I'll talk about is Princess Medallion class ships. So this is a project that we support through Integrated Insight, market research and industrial engineering. And the Medallion class ships are being rolled out through Princess Cruise Line, which is one of the brands under the Carnival Corporation. And we're in the middle of that project, a little bit on pause right now as the ships are shut down, but I'll talk a lot about that one as well. So let's start with Magic Your Way. So this was a holistic revenue strategy, and it was right when I was given responsibility for pricing and revenue management. And at the time, I had very little pricing experience other than the little bit I did at Lockheed Martin. So I was even wondering why they gave me responsibility for pricing, but it was because they wanted someone to think about it differently. And I had a knack for doing that. We had been doing our pricing pretty similar to how we had always done it, taking small incremental changes. And yet there were a lot of signs that showed it was no longer working as well as it did in the past. But the #1 barrier to visiting Walt Disney World was affordability. And this strategy was built around developing a ticketing structure and then supporting it with the rooms, the food and beverage, ancillary services to make it an affordable stay, a week-long stay. And we actually ended up rolling back the prices by 36%. So you could go back 15 years to see prices as low as what we then offered. Now that was on a week-long stay if you wanted to stay there, which is exactly what we wanted people to do, not only to get more people to come into the franchise, but to get the people who are already there to spend more money with Disney. As part of it, we introduced a new dining plan. actually multiple dining plans. We introduced the round trip transportation from the airport to the hotel and back, extra park hours for resort guests. We also had add-on components for park hopping and water parks. It was basically giving guests a ton of choice to fashion the vacation that fit them, fit their budget, fit their needs and desires, what they wanted to do, and put the most value where people place value. The first year we delivered about 200 million in incremental net income, and then that sustained itself every year. Plus it got bigger, based on the pricing that we were able to take year over year. So this project took about 18 months from concept to implementation. The actual concept, from the time we developed the concept, and we had several ideas that we bounced around before we landed on this one, but from the concept implementation was 18 months. It only took about 6 months between the concept and approval of the concept. So to get the general idea of it and the approval to go forward was about 6 months, but we needed another 12 months just to get the systems in place. So the ticketing structure that we implemented couldn't be sold through the ticketing system that we had. And we also needed to implement biometrics at each gate in order to stop the aftermarket. So even though Disney tickets were never transferable, we now gave people a great reason to try to resell them, because the entire structure was based on what you see up here in the corner, that the more days you buy, the less it costs for the next day.
Joni?
And drastically so by the time you got to the higher end.
Joni, this is Ron. I don't think your slides are advanced, and I'm not sure if you were trying to advance them.
No, I'm right here.
Okay.
Well, what slide do you see?
The start slide, the leading change.
No, I'm on, okay, let's see. I'm way further
Joni,
down.
you need to switch your screens because you're showing the one that you look at, not the one that you show to us.
Okay, hold on. It says my screen's paused. You want me to try new share?
Sure.
Let's see if this works. Can you see it changing?
Nope.
Now we see your PowerPoints.
Yep.
You do?
Yeah, we see the
Just not
PowerPoint.
in presentation view.
So what
There
now?
we go. There we go.
Oh, you can see it? Okay, can you, what page does now? Let's see.
My agenda.
Okay, good. Now it's not letting me go down, but let me try. I could try this. Yeah, there we go. Can you see this page, the Magic Your Way strategy?
Yes.
No, it's do what I love. There you go.
There's a definite delay. What do you see now?
Magic your way.
Okay,
revenue
good. That's where
strategy.
we should be. Okay,
Okay, you're not in SlideShare though. You're just in your present, like in your editing.
that's okay.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
We can see it.
Okay, as long as you can see it, good. So it's the diminishing marginal day that you can see the price of the tickets got a lot cheaper as you go. The other thing is we took a 9% increase on the single day ticket, which is twice what we ever did, and something that would get a lot of attention in the press. So there was risk associated with it, which is why we put the biometrics on it. The other is we had to design and implement a luggage transfer system from Orlando International Airport to the resorts. Literally building a separate building at Orlando International Airport where we would take the luggage off of the different airlines where guests were coming in off, and then deliver the luggage separately to the resort while the guests just went down and caught the bus, Magical Express bus, to go to the resort without their luggage. And then we had to add a new system to support the dine plans. So a lot of technology that was involved in actually implementing the strategy once we had it designed. Okay, let's see. Did it advance?
Not yet.
Yep, you're on what we learned.
Yeah, okay, good. Very slow. So the first was that embracing research and consumer insights. So one of the things we learned through this very clearly is that if you understand what the consumer wants and you build a strategy around that, it almost always works, versus if you're trying to force fit consumers into a certain behavior. So it was all about giving them choice and being able to let them decide what they wanted to do. The second thing was really understanding the value proposition. So what we did here was realize that most of the value is being placed on the park experience and just the memories that people were creating, and that there wasn't a lot of resistance to the park pricing. It was more about buying the food and beverage throughout the stay, or finding a place to stay that was affordable, or even the cost of airfare and the cost of renting a car, things like that. So we figured out the value proposition. We also realized that it was important to develop guiding principles in what we were trying to achieve. So anytime you're working with a strategy that's all encompassing, there's a lot of opportunity to go off the rails. And so through these guiding principles, we were able to keep everybody on the same track as to what we were trying to achieve, and whether every decision we were making was supportive of that, or was it just something that felt more comfortable that we've done in the past, or something that maybe was another agenda that wasn't necessarily part of what we were trying to do. One of the biggest things was the difficulty in aligning an organization. So prior to this, every aspect of Disney had a separate P&L, so a separate pro forma, a separate accounting system that they were being held accountable for. Like each park had its own revenue, profit and loss statement, each resort, each food and beverage location. And what we did here was organize all the revenue under my one group, so that we didn't have to work independently and in silos, but we would do what was best for the guest overall. So if we wanted to give a 40% reduction on food and beverage, we could do that, because the food and beverage organization now became very laser focused on operations. And then the last one is the courage to take calculated risk. So we really had a risky proposition, but we had done like 3 different discrete choice research projects in order to prove that what we thought would happen. And they aligned very well. So that the only thing left to do is to actually go do it. And it was not one of those strategies that you could implement halfway. You had to do the whole strategy at once in order to get the value out of it. But those are all the things that we kind of learned through this one. I would say, there were more people that told me it couldn't be done than were people telling me, let me see how I can help you. But I think that's just the nature sometimes of working in large organizations, is that there is a fear of change to some degree that you're going to have to work your way through. If you want to read more about this strategy, you can. It's on our website at this URL here at the bottom. We wrote a case study of it, as a lot of people were asking about it. But that was the first one. So I'm going to go over here and see if I can advance again. So the next one, hopefully the slide's advancing, is My Magic Plus. Are we on that slide? Good. So this was a suite of technology, and the whole purpose was to try to make the experience at Disney less transactional. As somebody is walking through, like taking money out of their wallet for this, or picking up this thing, in order to facilitate their stay, and make it more experiential. The parks had not changed in years, like 40 some years. And there is very little technology actually embedded in the parks, other than in the exact rides or experiences that were built. But as you walk around the property, it looked very much like it did years ago. So the 4 main components, one were the magic bands, which if you've been to Disney recently, you've probably gotten a magic band. And this was to facilitate the guest information. So everything about the guest, it was a way of paying for things on that magic band, for them to be able to be recognized by cast members. Fast Pass was a very manual system up until this point, where you would have to actually walk across the park to go to a ride to pick up a Fast Pass, only to have to go back again later. And that became automated through the technology. The My Disney experience put a lot of functionality on the guests before they arrived, but also facilitated their stay in the park. And then the PhotoPass Memory Maker gave us the ability to combine the pictures that the guest was taking themselves with the pictures that they would have taken on Disney rides. So the ones that they can't take, but we have the camera angled so they could. And to combine those into making, scrapbooks or digital, scrapbooks, whatever they would like to do. So what this did was facilitate a much higher level of pre-planning. And that was good for the guests who wanted to pre-plan and were asking to pre-plan, because it put a lot more of the functionality, for them at their home. It also helped Disney because it allowed us to secure a greater proportion of their overall vacation spend pre-arrival. We also enabled the guests to do a lot through their Magic Band. So they could tap their Magic Band to order products and services. They could pay for items. They could make reservations. But it also was a way of the cast member being able to know the guest. So as a guest approached, depending on the information that they had put into the My Disney experience pre-arrival, we would actually know their name. Like we would know if it was someone's birthday, that would show up on the cast member's device. Similarly, like if you were checking into a resort, they would know that you already got off of the Magical Express bus, you were coming into the resort, and you could greet them by name. But this went on. And the more information the guest gave us, the more personalized the cast member could make the experience. So this one took about 5 years from concept to implementation. It was $1 billion investment. The biggest cost of that was to put Wi-Fi throughout the property. So again, no technology at all within these parks. And so having to go back and retrofit them to be able to use the technology itself to do what we wanted to do with the guest. We had 28,000 hotel rooms that we had to go in and change out the locks on. The Magic Bands themselves had to be developed with the technology embedded in them. We needed to do the development on the mobile app and then also automate this entire FastPass system and then the customer relationship management part. That massive amount of data, and it was massive considering how much information we were collecting every hour, also came with a significant investment in data scientists. And while there were many data scientists already at Disney, not nearly enough in order to make use of all of this information. Prior to this, we had actually implemented a command center under the tunnel under the Magic Kingdom to do a lot of what this system now enabled us to do. Because at that point, we couldn't even figure out a wait time for a line without doing a more manual process that we were using cameras and markers on the ground in order to do. But now every guest that walked by and got into the line gave us a good indication of how long the line was. So there was a lot that this replaced that we were doing very manually, but the investment was huge. So what did we learn here? This one, I just don't think I can use my cursor to go down. This one, the first thing we learned is the 5 years for a technology project is an actual eternity. And it became a problem in a very interesting way. So at the time we started with this, we thought that the Magic Bands were the way to go. But as we got through it, the question came as to why we wouldn't just use someone's smartphone. Because in the 5 years, smartphones really came on with a lot more functionality and their own app development. And there was a lot that we could have done with the smartphone versus having the Magic Bands. We still needed to have the Wi-Fi technology, but there was a lot we could have done. So going forward, as Disney rolls this out into other properties around the world, that is exactly what they're doing. They're starting to use more of the guest smartphone versus having to do the Magic Band. But the next one I'm going to talk to you about goes back to having a device itself, and I'll tell you why. The second thing is that, and keep in mind that 5 years, most startup, this is one of the things I mentioned at the very beginning, most startup companies that are working on technology are going from concept to implementation sometimes in 9 months. That's not unusual to be less than a year to get it up and running because you're fighting against others who are doing the same thing. You want to be first to market. In a large corporation, that's not the goal, to be first to market. The goal is to make it work and to not disrupt what you already have going. So you have shareholders to be beholden to. You really need to understand if it's going to generate, incremental revenue versus what you're getting today. So it's kind of a different environment. And I think that, the 5 years also is partly because of how much it gets bogged down in just an approval process. The second thing is and we've seen this so much in our own company in the past 12 years, but it is hard to justify investment in infrastructure based on typical return on investment measures. So there's been a pattern, really. We've seen it in many different companies, that as we go into a recession, or if budgets are constrained, that IT projects are put on hold, and you end up band-aiding the systems that you have, or trying to find workaround measures. Well, you do that over a long enough period of time, and it gets to the point where it just breaks, and you can no longer do that. And this project, like many others that we saw at Disney and in other places now since, that they were up against that. It's like the technology investment just had to be made, and it will benefit the company going forward in many ways, but somebody had to bite the bullet. So we had a long conversation, many conversations about what is the proper expectation on a return on investment on projects that are simply infrastructure based, that needs to be either spread amongst many different projects, or we just have to bite the bullet. The next one is this one had a very disparate value proposition. There were so many tentacles to the MyMagic Plus that it became difficult to measure. And where the revenue strategy, the Magic Your Way revenue strategy, went straight to the bottom line. Within a couple of days, we knew whether or not it worked. This was more long-term, that if you develop a better experience, a less stressful experience, a more seamless experience, will people come back more often? Could you really see, incremental spending within the park based on recommending that people go to a certain restaurant, or that, this restaurant's, shorter line over here, or this ride may have a shorter line. Even the fast passes, the theory was that if we could take them from wasting time going back and forth across the park to pick up a paper ticket to come back to Fast Pass with a Fast Pass ticket, if you could do that all electronically and never leave the spot you were standing in, would they spend more time in merchandise shops and more time in restaurants? And the answer was mostly they spent more time in other lines. So they just went and gone into another line for another ride. And so this is what made it really hard to measure whether or not we were really getting the incremental revenue that we thought we would. The next one was just because you have the functionality doesn't necessarily mean people will use it. And from a guest perspective, we knew that this was coming because all of our research indicated that people are kind of split down the middle. Half of them are planners. They want to plan out what they're going to do, at least some of it. And the other half are non-planners. So they want to be more spontaneous. So from their perspective, the ones that are spontaneous, we actually managed to put aside some inventory. So for example, some fast pass inventory or dining reservation inventory for people who didn't like to plan, because you didn't want their experience to be really detrimental because of that. But still, anytime they couldn't get a reservation, they would blame it on the other people who did all the stuff in advance. But the biggest challenge on functionality was actually getting the cast members to engage. So it became a different kind of experience, and some are more outgoing than others, and some are more comfortable in calling somebody by their name or recognizing a birthday. Others are not. And so that continues to be a challenge in terms of hiring and training, and to what extent that you try to get people to be have a more intimate relationship with the guests than what they're used to doing. And then again, this is another one where there is a lot of risk. I would say this one also took a lot of perseverance in terms of seeing it to the end because of how long it did take to get it done. But it is done and it works really well. And it is being rolled out to other properties, just not without the smart bands. Going back to smartphones, not the magic bands. So hopefully this slide went to Princess Medallion ships, or it will soon. Anne-Marie will give me a thumbs up whenever it does. Good. So this one is also new technology. And if it looks or feels a little bit like the last one, MyMagic Plus, it's because the same person who spearheaded the MyMagic Plus at Disney is now at Carnival doing this project. So our role here is we support them with research and industrial engineering. So a lot of the logistics of it. But this one is putting new technology on a ship, and we started with the Princess ship, so it's one of the brands under Carnival. It starts with a wearable ocean medallion, the middle picture there, but you could put it in your pocket, you could put it in your wallet, you could carry it in your hand. As long as it's somewhere on your body and close to you, it works. And you can use it to make purchases, to order food to be delivered wherever you are on the ship, to open your door, your cabin door, You can use it to embark, debark, and then there's a lot of technology they put on the ship that you can interact with the medallion. They also have an app similar to the My Disney experience, which allows the guests to make a lot of things that they needed for embarking. So their passport, health requirements, etc., can get done on this app before they get to the port and just walk onto the ship. So it made it very easy. And now Princess has undisputed the best Wi-Fi at sea, because to enable all of this, the first thing the Princess needed to do was to figure out how to get some really, really good Wi-Fi on a ship. And if you've ever sailed, you know it can be very sporadic and not ever fast, but now it is on Princess. And it's all because of the technology investment they had to put into Wi-Fi. This one took about 4 years from concept to implementation. There's about 4,000 sensors on each ship that are being able to sense where you are with your medallion. Thousands of cabin doors that had to be redone. The app development that had to be developed, and then about 1,000 crew members to train. So this one, here's some of the lessons we learned here is that ships are made of steel, like lots of steel, and it is very, very difficult to get something to sense through steel. This was probably the biggest challenge and probably set them back about a year. Finally got it done, but the steel doors are made to stop water from flowing through a ship, and so being able to use this sensor to go through doors and open a cabin door was a big deal. It's also wireless communication at sea is very difficult to do, and so they finally got a company and worked very closely with them to do it to the extent that they needed, because it needed to be consistent considering how much you were going to now rely on this technology on the ship. You needed to get rid of the missing, whenever it would skip a beat, it had to be a lot, not just fast, but it had to be consistent. One of the biggest things that was a concern at the start was whether or not guests would adapt to the technology. So many cruise guests are older. Princess in particular had an older crew, older guest, and whether they'd adopt to it. And so we went out and did research around it, and really it was telling, because not only were they using technology today, but they were really excited about this as long as there was the right value proposition. So these were people who were already FaceTiming their grandchildren, with an iPad, and they already use their smartphone to find their way and, look up maps. And so as long as they saw, okay, I can sit here in my lounge chair and order a drink or order food without getting up, I'm in, right? Or I can get someone to bring me a cup of coffee somewhere, or I can no longer have to worry about getting lost on the ship. I can just use this, technology to do it. And so they adopted very quickly. So guests of all ages did. It also made it really easy to handle international guests. So it can be any language, that you want to use, where while the crew often has languages, multiple languages that crew members know, it is a very international experience. And so that helped a lot too. This was hard as well in terms of aligning a maritime organization. So part of this was the same as at Disney. The intent was to get the crew to engage more with the guests. And yet a maritime organization, very hierarchical and very specific roles and responsibilities, all built around safety, right? Safety for the guests, safety for the crew. So this is still a work in progress in terms of getting them to think differently about being as structured as they are, to have more interaction with the guest and leaving time to do that. And then this too took a lot of risk to implement it. It's interesting, Princess is further ahead with their technology and further ahead with the process than others, but all the cruise lines are now implementing something very similar to this, and for the same reason, that the experience has been the same as it has been for 30 some years, and very little technology was being used on the ship when people were coming to a point where they were expecting it to be a little bit more seamless than what it was. So those are the three, that I think are good examples of what it takes to get these kinds of projects through an organization. I would say that, it really does take a lot of perseverance. I mean, you're going to meet resistance along the way, but if you have the right buy-in from the executive team, which all of these did, then it helps a lot, to bulldoze through and be able to see implementation. Okay, so I'm ready to ask me anything, open it up to questions, whatever you may have. or anything, any other topic if you want to do that as well.
Sure, we'll open the floor to any questions. If you're comfortable with speaking your question, please leave your camera on because we'd like to see your face. If not, you can type out your question in the chat and I'll read it for Joni. Yeah, Michelle, go ahead.
Can you hear?
Oh, I have a double mute. I'm sorry. I was trying to get the tech to work, and of course it was working. Thank you so much for Joni. This was awesome. I've actually never heard of anyone speak of the tech side of tourism and hospitality, so it was very interesting for me to see. I had a question. It looks like there was a trend on each of the projects that you had, which was implementing all of these great ideas downwards to like the front line, right?
Yeah.
And having them actually use these great tools that you implemented. What has been one of like some of your success stories related to that? Have you been involved in any of that? Sorry, we have a visitor also.
That's a great question. Yes. So one of the things we realized is that on the front line, there were usually cast members who actually engaged very quickly. So they got it. They started to develop what we would call best practices, and it was very organic. I mean, they figured out with the information that they had on the guests that they knew about, right? Whether it was a birthday, an anniversary, or how many times they'd been, or if it was the first time they'd been, ways to engage and get a conversation going with them. And once they did that, the feedback that we would be getting in surveys actually would specifically call them out by name, say exactly what they did, but they created what we called wow moments. I mean, just really wowed the guest or what they were doing. So what we ended up doing was saying, you know, the answer lies in the fact that there are people out there already doing it. And if we could get more people to see what they're doing. So we made them heroes, basically. And we brought them in to teach the others what they were doing, but also got a ton of recognition for doing that. Again, you brought along some people that way, you know, others still would be too shy, right? It just wasn't cut out for them. So the next step would be to incorporate some of these personality behaviors, so to speak, into the hiring practice, so that you're hiring cast members that have a little bit more of an extrovert, you know, personality.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Joni, we have a question in the chat. You did mention to me before we started the speaker series that you were able to keep your staff over the COVID pandemic. But do you have any internship programs in the upcoming spring or summer semester?
We probably will. So depending on how things go. So we actually had 2 interns in the summer, I mean, in the spring, this past spring, that we brought in full time then in June. So we brought, we had 1 intern position that we had opened in March. And then we had another intern position. We was more opportunistic in simulation that we opened up in April, but we were able to make both of them full time in June. We just placed a bet that we would be okay and that we could do that. But we fully intend to do it again next year. So yes, and most likely it will be around one of 3 things or a couple of 3 things. One would be research and consumer insights. Another would be business development. So more along the economic, financial perspective, pricing included in that. And the other would be in simulation. So we're starting to do quite a bit of simulation, primarily for projects under development, so we can simulate what their design will be before they actually go build it to make sure that it actually operates well.
Great. We do have another question in the chat from Ken. Looking back now at the original plan for Magic Bands and what they were supposed to do originally, what would you do differently with them now?
Yeah, I think the right answer is to rely more on the smartphone technology that people already have in their pocket. You know, so most guests are coming in with at least one smartphone in the party. The the thing you lose is that you don't have a magic band on every single person. You would only be teeing off of the smartphone on whoever had one, usually the parents, right? Whereas we're also able to pick up a lot of children's activity off of the magic bands. But I think the smartphone, given how much you could put apps on the smartphone itself, would probably suffice now versus the magic bands. But that, again, was technology that kind of came into play during the project, right? During the process of the project. But that would be the biggest thing, is just not to do them at all, to just put all of the application on a smartphone and let people download it. What else do we have?
Joni,
Yes.
how it's moving from being in the company to going to a consulting position. So like providing services to the company. How was that for you?
Oh, it's very different. It's very, very different. So it was, again, I wanted to do it, and it's something that I had my eye on for a couple of years. But I think the biggest difference is that what I expected to happen did happen, was that I'm much more involved in the work now. So actually doing a lot of the work and being much closer to the actual work being done versus in my executive position, I was getting further and further away from it. So that's a big difference, but one that I thought would happen, and I'm glad it did. The other is just the business development side of it. So, we have to acquire clients, right? We spend a lot of time writing proposals. We were fortunate that we had quite a lot of network from our Disney colleagues that had gone on to other companies and hired us because they know what we could do, and saw our work and trusted our work. So that's helped us a lot. In fact, we didn't hire a marketing person until last year, like a year ago, which has been really good. I mean, we're glad we did, but that was the first time we've hired a marketing person. But during the business development side of it, it's like the necessary evil, running a small business, is that you actually have to go out and get the work and do the proposals. I would say for us, we're pretty fortunate because probably 75% of what we do, we're not bidding against anybody. We're literally working off of our network and off of people calling us as a sole source. So that helps a lot, but that would be the biggest difference.
Thank you. This is great.
You're a quiet bunch.
Sure. We also had another question from Ken. As someone who is a Disney cast member, do you have any advice about moving up through the Walt Disney Company or any large company that has a lot of employees with similar qualifications?
Yeah, I do. In fact, I just gave a presentation on this a few weeks ago, that one of the things that I've always done is really focused on the job that I had, at the current time, and trying to make it a lot better than what it was before I got it. And which wasn't always easy, because oftentimes I was stepping into somebody's shoes where I thought they did a tremendous job, with the job before me. But what I would do is just try to make it a lot better, listen a lot to internal clients, what their needs were, and how we could improve what we were doing or add on services that we weren't doing already in order to make it better. That was noticed. Along with that came a notice on the ability to solve complex problems. So we were in a rapid growth mode, and so there was a lot going on, but became known as somebody who could tackle complexity well. Some of it was because of our growth, some of it was just because of actual disasters. I mean, so 9/11 is a good example, and I had forecasting responsibility during 9/11, which was near impossible, to forecast what we were doing. But just the amount of effort we put into it, or just the amount of thought process, to get to the best answer we could, got noticed, which is why they gave me pricing responsibility. So I would have to say that most of my career, it was a recognition of the work that I was doing. If I looked at myself, compared to my colleagues, I'd say one of the things is I was willing to take more risk than they were. not being conservative in my approach to things. And the other would be is like just staying layers of focused on what I had to do at that point in time, not necessarily looking for the next promotion. But it really is about doing a great job with what you have, but not just the status quo. I think that's the difference. I was always trying to push the envelope. Michelle.
Thank you. Sorry. So talking back to like the risk management or crises, you said that you were in forecasting during 9/11, and we're kind of in a similar situation right now where we aren't sure what's going to happen. Taking the knowledge that you used back then, how would you see where the tourism industry is heading to now with the crisis that we're currently in?
That's a great question. I think it's very different, very, very different. So with 9/11, it's different in a number of ways. So with 9/11, it was very quick, immediate impact, and which is similar to COVID actually, but and everybody, I think, collectively was on the same page, right? We all saw the same thing happen. I think everyone had very similar emotions about, what now? And it had this long-term recurring effect for a few years relative to when's the next shoe going to drop, right? What's going to happen next. So we were not able, this is what made the forecast so difficult. We weren't able to find a steady period of time, that we could get grounded on what's going to happen next. We did, from a company perspective, from a business perspective, we had very, very few cancellations, of future trips, but future bookings just completely dried up. So it took a few years to get out of that. And again, it was the recurring incidents that happened after it. But from a perspective of the nation, seemed to be on the same page. And we actually benefited a little bit in recovery from people not wanting to necessarily travel abroad quickly and staying more, in the United States. With COVID, it's kind of sudden, right? Mid-March, I can tell you exactly mid-March when most of our clients shut down, right? But this one was quite different. First of all, the nation's not all on the same page, with this one. It could be that your job hasn't been impacted at all. You haven't had COVID. You don't know anyone who's had COVID. Maybe the most you're looking at from a change perspective is putting a mask on to go to the grocery store, right? Where somebody else could have lost their job, their home, be very ill, seeing death in their family. So I think we're a nation divided in terms of how it impacts us. But with this one, you can see the light at the end of the tunnel immediately, right? You kind of know we've never been through a disease that we haven't been able to find a vaccine to conquer it, right? Or we'll get our arms around this and it'll be short-term effect. It's not an external threat. So I think it's a lot different, and even though the travel industry was hurt much more, than other industries, I think they will bounce back significantly and do as well, if not better, than they were before, right? So I think it's very different, and it's not an unknown threat as much as it's, if we can just roll through this, right? If we can bide our time and get through this, it will be okay. And I truly do believe that. And I truly do believe that travel is going to come back very, very strong. No question about it. For some period of time, I think a little bit opposite of 9/11, that there will be pent up demand for international travel, coming out of it. So domestically, we may see a little bit of softness as people regain the ability to go to other countries, but that'll even itself out over a couple of years.
Thank you.
It's interesting, the medallions, the princess medallions, had they had those on the ship, the first ship that got infected, right, off the coast of Japan, it would have been a whole different story. They would have known immediately, everybody who was around the people who were showing up in the infirmary.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see the technology that you created for something completely different, how you can utilize it for something like this.
Yes. and they will be utilizing it, and a lot of other cruise lines will be utilizing it. So I think you're going to see a lot of difference, especially a contained environment. I mean, cruise lines have been dealing with norovirus for years. So it's a very different environment where, if something catches on a ship, you don't have anywhere to offload people sometimes for a couple of days. So they have to take it, I think, a lot more seriously than others. So do airlines and trains and things like that. I think the parks are the ones that are probably going to see a little bit more leniency, parks or attractions or outdoor concerts or stadiums. I think things will probably go a little bit more back to normal there. Anything else? What else?
Do we have any other questions for Joni? Wow, it is a quiet bunch today, Joni.
Election day. Everybody go out and vote if you haven't already.
Well, if there are no other questions for Joni, we will let her go a little early then. Do you want to speak about any of the projects that you have down the pipeline, Joni?
Yeah, a few. I mean, we're, the projects that continued quite easily were the ones that are development projects. So we're working on some destination development in the Dominican Republic, working with a company called Meow Whoop. I don't know if anyone's heard of them, but it's an experiential art attraction out in Santa Fe, and they're under a pretty rapid development plan right now to expand into other cities. It's a really great experience. So we're doing a lot of their future planning work and helping them develop their new installations from a simulation perspective. We're working with a company down in Miami on just a massive redevelopment project, working with something up in Atlanta, an opportunistic, land play to put up an attraction. So those projects have continued pretty well. And then now we're starting to see more of our clients start to try to get back into the game. The timeshares are coming back strong. Everywhere except for Orlando, they're doing quite well. And in fact, they've hired back a lot of their staff that they had furloughed, and they're moving ahead, with development plans and, branding, pricing, et cetera. Others, I think our theme park clients and attraction clients in California are going to have a hard go of it. Probably going to continue to be down for probably another 9 months or so. So that seems to be the hardest hit area in terms of getting tourism back in place. We've been working with the Empire State Building on some things, New York Botanical Garden. So New York attractions that are iffy, they tend to think they're out of the woods and then go back into the woods again for a while. But it's interesting, it's interesting to see how different people respond and different companies respond. None of our clients have gone under, so I think we're thankful for that. And they'll probably all come back strong. Princess, this project we're in the middle of, but we need the ships to get back sailing to keep working on it.
Great. Well, thank you so much again, Joni, for joining us today on this week's Tourism Tuesday. So next week, we will actually take a break from Tourism Tuesday. And so 2 weeks from today, we will have Jason Dugan join us with the new Hotel Elio. This is the Hotel Shands Elio here in Gainesville. He will actually be providing us a virtual tour of this brand new hotel that opened up over the summer. So hopefully you'll join us in the next 2 weeks. And thank you again, Joni, for joining us today.
You're quite welcome.
Thank you, everybody, for joining in.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
I think